the Hendersons thought it would be a perfect summer afternoon. By nightfall, not a single one of them would survive. If that sent a chill down your spine, you need to hear this story. Because it's not just about a barbecue, it's about how a sunny day can collapse into a nightmare in ways you never imagine. Stay with me, because the horror of this story is exactly what makes it unforgettable. It was a day like any other, or at least that's what the Henderson family thought. The sun hung high over Maplewood, a small town that prided itself on neat lawns, tidy sidewalks, and quiet streets. Birds chirped lazily as sprinklers hissed and sputtered, while the smell of sizzling meat floated from the Henderson backyard. Rachel Henderson, the matriarch, hummed cheerfully as she flipped burgers on the grill, one eye on her 2 children darting through the yard. Her husband, Mark, laughed as he helped their teenage son, Jason, set up a ping-pong table. The youngest, Lily, barely 7, ran barefoot between the legs of grown-ups, squealing with delight. Friends and neighbors had gathered, and for a few hours, it seemed like the perfect summer day. Laughter bounced between fences, the children shrieked with joy, and the smell of charcoal mixed with the sweet grass. But something felt off. A shadow flickered across the yard. A figure lingered beyond the fence line, just for a moment. Mark noticed it first and frowned. "Did anyone else see that?" he asked. No one answered. The moment passed. Laughter continued. But deep down, Mark felt it, a cold awareness creeping up his spine, a whisper that this day wasn't ordinary, and wouldn't end well. The first sign. It arrived subtly, almost innocently, in the form of a phone call. Rachel's sister, Amy, had arrived unexpectedly, flustered and out of breath. She talked quickly about traffic and a minor fender bender, but her hands shook slightly, betraying a deeper fear. I saw someone on my way here," Amy stammered. "A man, standing in the middle of the street, just staring. Didn't move when I honked. Just watched." Rachel forced a nervous laugh. "Probably just a weird guy. Don't worry about it." Amy's eyes were wide, and she muttered under her breath, "It didn't feel right. Something's wrong." Mark chuckled uneasily, but the feeling lingered, like smoke curling through the air. The atmosphere shifts. As afternoon faded into evening, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. The children's laughter waned, replaced with occasional shrieks of surprise as stray dogs or squirrels ran across the grass. And then, the knocking began. Tap, tap, tap. At first, it was subtle. Mark assumed it was the wind or a branch brushing against the door. But soon it came again, sharper, deliberate. Jason ran to the back door, expecting a neighbor, but no one was there. No footprints. No evidence that anyone had approached. Rachel tried to calm everyone, but her voice faltered. "Probably just a branch." Amy, pale and silent, whispered, "It's not a branch. It's him." The emotional hook. Amy didn't explain further, but Mark understood. Whoever he was, he had been watching them long before the barbecue began. He knew their routines, their vulnerabilities, their habits. He had chosen this day for a reason. The sense of impending doom was suffocating. Beneath the laughter, the warm sunlight, and the smell of grilled meat, a darkness had settled, quiet, patient, waiting. By nightfall, the Hendersons would realize just how fragile their sense of safety really was. If you've ever wondered how a seemingly perfect day can spiral into a nightmare, stay with me. Because what happened next isn't just terrifying, it's a story of obsession, rage, and the kind of horror that lurks behind suburban smiles. Watch closely, because this isn't just a story about a barbecue. It's about how quickly everything familiar can become the last memory you'll ever have. Shadows in the backyard. They thought the laughter and smells of summer would protect them. They were wrong. Something had been waiting, watching, all along. If that made your heart skip a beat, stay with me. Because the story is about to turn. What seemed like small unease is about to grow into something far darker, something no family ever expects in their own backyard. crept over them. Mark busied himself by topping off drinks and rearranging chairs, pretending nothing was wrong. Rachel laughed nervously as she watched Lily chase fireflies around the yard. Jason and his friends played ping pong, shrieking at every point scored. Even Amy tried to join in, forcing smiles while her eyes darted to the fence line. But the shadows in the yard had grown longer. The sunlight no longer warmed, it only stretched, twisting ordinary objects into grotesque forms. And those fleeting shadows, Mark wasn't imagining them, seemed to move against the flow of the sun, lurking where they shouldn't. Then came the next sign, a soft scraping noise at the back gate. Not loud enough to be a person walking, not irregular enough to be a branch, but deliberate. Calculated. Rachel froze, her spatula hovering over a sizzling burger. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Mark's stomach twisted. He nodded slowly, scanning the yard. The children were oblivious, laughing and screaming with delight, but something inside him screamed that the danger had moved closer. A stranger in the shadows. It was Jason who first saw him. A man standing at the edge of the yard, tall, broad-shouldered, and completely still. His face was obscured by shadows, but Mark could see the glint of eyes as the man's gaze locked on their family. "Dad, there's someone there," Jason said, voice trembling. Mark's breath caught. He forced a smile. "It's probably just a neighbor or someone passing by." But the man didn't move. He didn't wave. He didn't blink. He simply stood, staring. And then, he smiled. A slow, knowing, horrifying smile. Mark felt bile rise in his throat. This wasn't a passerby. This was someone who knew them. Someone who had been watching. Rachel grabbed Lily and pulled her close. "We should go inside," she whispered. But the man didn't move. Not until the shadows began to grow longer, and the sun disappeared behind clouds. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished. The fear tightens. The atmosphere in the Henderson yard shifted. Laughter no longer felt carefree. Every bird call sounded shrill. Every rustle in the grass sounded deliberate. Amy couldn't hold it back any longer. "I told you. I've seen him before," she said urgently. "This man, he watches families. He chooses them. And today, he's chosen you." Mark's face paled. "Chosen us for what?" Amy shook her head. "I don't know yet. But if you don't leave, if you don't act now, he will take everything. All of you." Before Mark could respond, there was another sound. One that froze everyone in place. A faint knock at the back door. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't violent. It wasn't demanding. But it carried weight. A cold, deliberate rhythm, like someone counting off their victims. The children clutched each other, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it. Mark swallowed hard, sweat running down his temple. I need to see," he muttered. Rachel shook her head. "No. Don't answer it." But the knock came again, closer this time, and then, silence. The first encounter. Mark's hands shook as he approached the back door. The cool evening air made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He peered through the glass pane. Nothing. And yet, the hairs on his arms rose. There was something there. Watching. Waiting. A shadow moved. A small, deliberate figure darted behind the fence, disappearing into the darkness. Jason tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, did you see her?" "She? Who?" Mark asked, though his voice was tight. "The little girl," Jason whispered. "In the corner. She was smiling at me." Rachel gasped. "Lily, did you see anyone?" Lily shook her head, clutching her rabbit. "No, just the shadows." But Mark knew. He knew someone, or something, was already inside the perimeter of their lives, invisible yet omnipresent. The emotional hook. That evening, as the Hendersons tried to finish the barbecue, the sense of unease grew unbearable. Each laugh felt hollow. Each moment of joy carried the weight of something waiting, something patient. Because by now, it wasn't just a man or a girl. It was a presence, a shadow that followed them, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. The Hendersons' perfect summer day was slipping away, and they didn't yet understand how thin the line between ordinary life and sheer terror could be. If you think a barbecue is safe, think again. Because sometimes the most ordinary days hide the most extraordinary dangers. Stay with me. Because what happens next isn't just frightening, it's unimaginable. The tension that started as shadows and soft knocks is about to explode into chaos, and nothing will ever be the same for the Hendersons, or for anyone who witnesses this story. The stranger moves closer. They thought the knocks were just a warning. By nightfall, they would realize it was far worse, an invitation to the nightmare already stalking them. If that made your stomach turn, stay with me. Because now, the invisible threat is no longer distant. It's inside the yard. It's inside their lives. And it's about to make its presence terrifyingly known. As the sky darkened, the Henderson backyard no longer felt safe. The golden glow of the barbecue lanterns flickered uneasily, casting shadows that danced like specters across the lawn. The children, sensing the shift, grew quieter. Jason stopped playing ping pong, his eyes scanning the perimeter nervously. Lily clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit and hid behind her mother's legs. Mark tried to maintain calm, but the earlier warnings, the knocks, the fleeting shadows, Amy's frantic insistence, gnawed at him. There was no denying it anymore. Someone, or something, was watching them. And it wasn't content to remain hidden. The first real encounter. It started with a sound so subtle that Rachel nearly missed it, the soft crunch of gravel near the side gate. Mark froze. "Did you hear that?" Amy nodded, pale. "It's him. He's here." Before anyone could react further, the side gate creaked open slowly. No wind. No noise from the rest of the neighborhood. Just the gate swinging inward, as if pushed by invisible hands. Then he appeared. A man, tall, with a broad frame. His features were partially obscured by the darkness, but his presence was undeniable. There was a calmness to him that made the blood run cold, a predator confident in his plan. He stepped toward the family, slow, deliberate, each movement measured. Who are you?" Mark demanded, though his voice quivered. The man smiled. Not a friendly smile, but one that seemed to know every fear, every secret, every weakness of the family. No words were spoken. None were needed. His intent was clear. The family's panic. Rachel grabbed Lily, spinning toward the house. "Everyone inside," she shouted, her voice cracking with fear. Jason ran for the door, but the man's shadow fell over him. He froze. Mark, heart hammering, stepped forward. "Stay back. I won't let you." But the man simply raised a hand, and everything in the yard seemed to pause. Even the wind stopped. The air grew heavy, suffocating. Amy whispered, trembling, "He's not here to talk. He's here to take." And then the first scream shattered the air. Lily had dropped her rabbit and stumbled backward, shrieking as the man bent low, a horrifying glint in his eye. Mark lunged to grab her, but she vanished. Not physically. But the terror she felt, the shock in her voice, made it clear something unnatural had claimed her attention. The darkness tightens. The Hendersons were now trapped in a nightmare that didn't follow the rules of the ordinary world. The lights of the barbecue flickered and died. The wind rose sharply, carrying the sounds of whispers, faint knocks, and distant laughter that didn't belong to anyone there. Rachel pressed her children against her chest, rocking them, trying to shield them from what she couldn't even see. Jason's hands shook as he gripped the doorframe, and Mark's knees threatened to buckle under the weight of their fear. From somewhere near the back of the yard, a soft voice whispered, "Let me in." It wasn't Lily. It wasn't any of them. But it sounded real, terrifyingly real. Amy fell to her knees, shaking. "He's here," she said. "He's choosing. And the longer we stay, the closer he gets." The emotional hook. At that moment, the Hendersons understood the full gravity of their situation. This wasn't a random attack. It wasn't a burglary or a robbery. It was personal. Somewhere in the shadows, the man was studying them, deciding who would live and who would not. And he had all the time in the world. The laughter, the smells of grilled meat, the warmth of a perfect summer day, they were gone. In their place was pure, unrelenting fear. Because by the time the night was over, the Henderson family would learn just how fragile safety truly is, and how fast a perfect day can turn into a massacre. If you've ever believed that suburban streets and family gatherings are safe, think again. Because what happens when a predator moves from the shadows to the center of your life is something you'll never forget. Stay with me, because the next act reveals the horrifying moment when the nightmare crosses the threshold, and no one is safe anymore. The threshold of terror. They thought locking the doors and hiding inside would protect them. By the time the night ended, they'd realize that some threats don't knock, they break through. If that made your skin crawl, stay with me. Because what comes next is the point of no return, where the ordinary backyard becomes a trap, and the Henderson family faces a nightmare they cannot escape. The backyard had transformed. The warm, golden glow of the barbecue lanterns was gone. In its place, darkness stretched across the lawn like a living entity, curling around every chair, every toy, every small movement. Mark paced near the sliding door, his hands gripping the frame so tightly his knuckles turned white. Rachel held Lily and Jason close, whispering words she barely felt herself. Amy sat frozen, her gaze fixed on the shadows, her body taut with anticipation. Then it happened. A loud, deliberate knock at the sliding door, hard enough to rattle the glass. Tap. 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 The family froze. Every instinct screamed, "Do not open it." But curiosity, terror, and disbelief collided inside Mark. He knew whoever, or whatever, was outside was testing them, pushing them closer to the edge. The first strike. Before Mark could even react, a sound shattered the night, glass breaking. Not from the door. Not from a window. From inside. Jason screamed as shards of light and sound exploded near the dining table. Something had entered the house without a trace. The man, the predator, was inside. It was impossible. They had locked the doors. They had checked the perimeter. But he was there. And he wasn't alone. A figure in the corner, a girl, small, in a tattered dress, watched silently. She smiled. Her eyes glinted with something not human. "Mom. Dad," Lily's voice trembled. She's smiling, but she's not Lily. Rachel's heart dropped. The room seemed to shrink. Every shadow now held a threat. Every sound made her jump. Mark reached for a chair, ready to defend his family, but the predator didn't attack immediately. He circled slowly, a predator savoring the fear he had cultivated. The family realizes the horror. Amy's voice broke the tense silence. "It's not just him. It's them. They're together. He's possessed, or something worse. And that girl, she's what he's waiting for. The one he's chosen to bring them down." Mark shook his head, refusing to believe it. "No, it can't be. That's impossible." But when the little girl stepped closer, giggling softly, and the man's eyes glinted black as coal, he understood. It was real. And their fate wasn't in their hands anymore. The living room felt like a cage. Every exit seemed to shrink. The predator was patient, studying them, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The emotional hook. In that moment, the Henderson family understood the unthinkable truth: their safe, suburban home was gone. Their childhood memories, their laughter, their trust and safety, destroyed in seconds. Mark looked at his family, his chest tightening with helplessness. Rachel clutched Lily as Jason wept silently beside her. They were facing a terror so primal, so intimate, it was beyond reasoning. Fear had invaded every corner of their lives. Every heartbeat, every glance, every shadow whispered, "This is it. You cannot escape." And the predator, he knew it. The escalation. Suddenly, the air shifted. A cold gust blew through the house. Candles flickered out. The television, left on in the background, burst into static, crackling loudly. The man moved closer. The little girl followed. Soft giggles filled the corners of the room, and a sense of inevitability descended like a dark fog. Mark realized something horrifying. This wasn't random. It was ritualistic. Planned. Personal. They had not just been observed. They had been chosen. And tonight, everything they loved would be tested. If you think fear is something that can be outrun, think again. Because when a predator enters your home, and when innocence itself becomes part of the nightmare, there's no turning back. Stay with me, because the next act reveals the moment when terror turns into tragedy, and the perfect day spirals into a massacre that will haunt everyone who witnesses it. The nightmare unleashed. They thought the darkness outside was the danger. By now, they'd learned that the real horror had already crossed the threshold. If that made your heart race, stay with me. Because this is where fear stops being a warning and becomes an unstoppable force, tearing apart everything the Hendersons held dear. The night had swallowed the backyard. The barbecue lanterns no longer glowed. Only the faint, flickering light of the kitchen overhead revealed the terror inside the Henderson home. Mark held Lily tightly, trying to shield her from the creeping dread. Rachel clutched Jason to her chest, whispering words that were meant to calm, but even she could feel the fear eating through her. Amy huddled near the corner, silently praying, though no deity seemed to answer. Then, the first strike came. A loud crash reverberated from the living room. Mark spun around just in time to see the predator throw a chair across the room, shattering glass and splintering wood. The little girl, still giggling softly, stepped over the debris as if the chaos around her were nothing more than a game. Jason screamed. Lily's wails echoed. Rachel tried to shield them, but the predator advanced with unnerving calm. He moved faster than any human should be able to. Every step deliberate. Every glance calculated. Mark lunged to stop him. But as he reached out, the man's hand flashed forward like lightning, knocking Mark to the floor. Pain exploded in his chest, and he gasped for breath as the predator's smile widened. The family trapped. The Hendersons realized the truth: there was no escape. The front door was locked. The back gate had been breached. Windows shattered or jammed. Every exit was either blocked or controlled by the predator. And yet, the worst part wasn't just the physical danger, it was the psychological one. The predator didn't just attack. He toyed with them, forcing them to watch the destruction of their home, the collapse of their sense of safety, and the unraveling of their lives, second by second. Amy, eyes wide, whispered through trembling lips, "He's feeding on the fear. He wants us broken before." Her voice trailed off as the little girl's laugh filled the room, echoing like nails on a chalkboard. Rachel sobbed, gripping Lily. "Please, just stop. Take me instead, anyone but them." But the predator didn't hear pleas. He didn't respond to mercy. His presence was absolute. The first loss. The little girl's giggle turned into a shriek, high, piercing, almost joyous in its cruelty. She darted across the room and grabbed Jason by the arm, pulling him toward the corner. Mark lunged again, but this time Amy intervened, screaming. The room erupted into chaos. Furniture toppled. Glass shattered. The predator moved with calculated efficiency, separating the family, isolating them. By the end of what felt like seconds but was surely minutes, one of the Hendersons had vanished. Lily screamed for Jason. Jason screamed for Mark. Mark screamed for Rachel. Rachel's voice cracked into a guttural wail that seemed to shake the walls themselves. The predator watched. Calm. Methodical. Patient. It wasn't just a massacre in motion, it was ceremony. A ritual of terror designed to strip away hope and leave only despair. The emotional hook. In that moment, the Hendersons understood the depth of their helplessness. The predator wasn't just an intruder. He wasn't a burglar, or robber, or even a psychopath driven by greed. he was something else entirely. A presence that fed on terror, that used the ordinary, the laughter, the love, the warmth of a family gathering, as bait. Every scream, every plea, every tear only strengthened him. And now, the family faced a horrifying reality: not everyone would survive the night. If you think a home can protect you, think again. Because sometimes the most familiar places hide the most unimaginable horrors. Stay with me. The nightmare is far from over. The next act reveals the final moments leading to the full massacre, the choices, the fear, and the chilling aftermath that nobody could have imagined. The night of terror. They thought the nightmare was behind them. By now, they would realize it had only just begun, and there was no escaping it. If that made your heart pound, stay with me. Because what comes next is the point where horror becomes absolute, and nothing will ever be the same. The house was a war zone. Furniture lay shattered, glass littered the floor, and the once cheerful sounds of a summer barbecue were replaced with the piercing cries of terror. Mark crawled toward Rachel and Lily, chest burning, lungs screaming for air. The predator had split the family, moving like a shadow between them, his figure impossible to track. The little girl, small, pale, smiling, seemed to orchestrate the chaos, darting between rooms, her presence unnervingly inhuman. Rachel tried to shield Lily, dragging her behind a toppled sofa. Jason screamed for his father, but the sound only drew the predator closer. The predator revealed. The man stepped into the center of the living room, every movement deliberate, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The air seemed to vibrate with his presence. "Why are you doing this?" Mark shouted, desperation cracking his voice. The predator didn't answer. He didn't need to. His intentions were clear: to break them, piece by piece, until nothing of the family remained. And then he advanced. The horror intensifies. The little girl giggled from the corner, her smile wide and unnerving. She moved as if she knew something that no one else could see, darting between furniture, appearing behind Jason one second and behind Rachel the next. Mark lunged again, this time catching the predator's sleeve. But it was like grabbing smoke. His hands slipped through, leaving Mark winded and off balance. Amy screamed from the hallway. "He's taking them! He's taking them!" In the blink of an eye, Jason was gone. The predator had whisked him into the darkness, leaving only his terrified cries echoing through the empty halls. Rachel screamed for her children, her voice raw with panic. Lily clung to her, trembling, unaware of where her brother had gone. Mark's stomach twisted. He realized something horrifying: there was no stopping him. No reasoning, no bargaining, no fighting back that mattered. In those moments, terror became a tangible weight, pressing against their chests. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Every breath was laced with fear. The Hendersons understood a truth too terrible to grasp: the predator thrived on their despair, fed on their terror, and relished their helplessness. Mark's eyes met Rachel's across the room. No words were needed. Their fear, their love, their desperation, it was all on display, and the predator drew strength from it. And still, the little girl laughed. The final confrontation. Mark lunged once more, determined to save what remained of his family. He grabbed a heavy lamp and swung it at the predator, but it passed straight through him. A cold, unnatural force slammed into Mark, sending him crashing into the wall. Pain exploded through his body. He gasped, unable to move. Rachel screamed, holding Lily tightly. Amy fell to the floor, tears streaming down her face. The predator's laughter echoed, mingled with the soft giggles of the little girl. Every attempt to resist only intensified the chaos. Doors slammed. Windows shattered. Shadows moved independently of their owners. It was as if the house itself had become part of the nightmare. By the end of what felt like hours, but was surely minutes, the family was fractured, scattered, and broken. The predator stepped back, surveying the ruin. One final, deliberate knock echoed from the doorway, soft, chilling, and deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. The massacre was complete. If you thought fear was something you could outrun, think again. Because sometimes, the most ordinary moments, an afternoon barbecue, a quiet evening, a family gathering, can hide the unimaginable. Stay with me till the end, because the aftermath of this massacre will haunt you long after the story ends. The next act reveals the horrifying consequences, the discovery, and the lingering terror that remains when evil has come home. The silence after. They thought the nightmare would end with the dawn. By now, they would understand, sometimes, terror leaves a mark that never fades. If your heart is racing, stay with me. Because what happened after the massacre is as haunting as the events themselves. It's the moment when the smoke clears, and the horror leaves behind questions that may never be answered. The morning sun rose over Maplewood, bathing the Henderson home in a serene, golden light. But inside, serenity was a lie. The house was silent, eerily silent. Mark's eyes fluttered open. He was on the floor, bruised and battered, limbs aching. The air smelled of smoke, dust, and something fouler, something unearthly. He scrambled to his feet, heart hammering, and called out. "Rachel? Lily? Jason?" Silence. He stumbled through the wreckage, chairs overturned, shattered glass crunching underfoot, walls scratched as if by claws. The faintest giggle echoed somewhere in the distance, soft, lingering, and entirely out of place. Mark's chest tightened. Amy sat slumped in the hallway, eyes wide with shock. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. The aftermath. Rachel had vanished. Jason had vanished. Lily's room was empty. Mark sank to the floor, clutching his head. His mind spun. Every moment of the previous night, the laughter, the knocks, the shadows, the predator, the little girl, flashed in his memory. It was as if reality itself had split. The nightmare wasn't just in their minds, it had been real. Horribly real. The front door, which had been locked, now hung open slightly. Footprints, small and large, led into the backyard. But they didn't lead away. They ended abruptly, as if the earth itself had swallowed them. Mark's sobs filled the empty home. Fear, grief, and guilt combined into an unbearable weight. He had survived, but at what cost? His family, his life, his sense of safety, gone. And that little girl, he could still hear her soft giggle, the echo of it inside his head. The predator had vanished as mysteriously as he had arrived, leaving no trace except the devastation he caused. He realized a horrifying truth: some evil isn't meant to be confronted. Some terror isn't meant to be understood. It just waits, patient, until the next opportunity. The massacre had ended physically, but its psychological grip would linger forever. The lingering horror. Weeks later, investigators would find the Henderson home abandoned and broken. Neighbors whispered about screams in the night. Local children reported glimpses of a small girl in a pink dress wandering the street, vanishing when approached. No explanation, no arrest, no closure. The case was filed under unsolved, and Maplewood tried to return to normal. But for those who had witnessed the aftermath, there was no normal. Only memory, fear, and the chilling knowledge that sometimes, terror can walk into your life uninvited, and leave nothing but silence behind. Mark, the lone survivor, would live with this horror for the rest of his life. Every shadow, every knock at a door, every child's laugh carried the echo of that night. And he would never forget the little girl who smiled, the predator who came, or the massacre that stole his family. If this story has sent a shiver down your spine, remember this: terror doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it comes quietly, disguised as ordinary days, familiar faces, and harmless gatherings. Stay vigilant. Pay attention to the shadows. And never, ever ignore the knocks at your door. Because some horrors, once invited in, never truly leave.